Okay, y'all. You are not going to believe the absolute insanity, the heartbreaking betrayal, and the sheer who TF did I marry, or rather, who TF is my son dating, saga. I'm about to unpack for you. This isn't just a story, this was my life. For over a year, and it was built on a foundation of lies so deep, so twisted that frankly I'm still processing it all. It involved my teenage son, a woman who seemed, well, she seemed something, and a truth so shocking it shattered our family dynamic in ways I never could have imagined. If you're ready for the whole unfiltered truth, and trust me, it's a lot, hit that like, subscribe right now, and honestly share this with anyone who needs to hear it. You won't want to miss a single detail of this. Grab a coffee, grab a snack, maybe something stronger. This is going to be a long ride. All right, deep breath. Here's where it all began. My son, Liam, he was 17 at the time. A good kid. You know? Head in the clouds sometimes, obsessed with his friends, video games, and just starting to look at girls. We live in Oak Haven, North Carolina. It's a quiet, leafy suburb, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, or at least you think they do. Liam was a senior at Oak Haven High, getting ready to apply for colleges, figuring out his future. Pretty standard stuff. Then, one day, maybe late spring of his junior year, he came home buzzing. I remember he practically bounced through the front door, face split in a grin. "Mom, guess what?" he practically shouted, dumping his backpack by the stairs. I was in the kitchen, trying to decide if the sad-looking lettuce in the fridge was salvageable. "What, honey? Did you finally pass that physics quiz?" I joked. He waved his hand dismissively. "Better. I met someone." My heart did that fluttery mom thing. "Oh, someone nice?" I asked, smiling. I envisioned a sweet girl from school, maybe someone he'd had a crush on. Yeah, Mom, really nice. Her name is Chloe. I met her at that new coffee shop downtown, the Daily Grind. Oh, cute name. Was she working there? Nah, she was just there, sitting outside reading. I don't know, Mom. I just had to talk to her. We talked for like an hour. It was easy. He got this dreamy look on his face, and my stomach gave a tiny little lurch that I immediately dismissed. Just typical mum anxiety about my kid growing up, right? The first time I heard anything about an age difference was a few days later. Liam was on the phone, in his room, talking to his best friend, Noah. Their voices carry. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the laundry room is right next to his room, and I heard Noah go, "Dude, how old did you say she is?" Followed by a slightly lower, more cautious tone from Liam. I didn't catch the exact number that first time, but the tone of the conversation stuck with me. Later that week, Liam casually mentioned Chloe again. I asked how old she was. He got a little shifty, which wasn't like him. She's a little older, Mum, but not like old. Just, she's done with high school. Okay, alarm bells weren't deafening yet, but they were definitely jingling. A high schooler dating someone already graduated isn't unheard of, especially in the year gap. Maybe 18 and 19, 18 and 20. But Liam's hesitation made me wonder. I pushed gently. "How much older, honey?" He sighed, like I was being difficult. "She's 23, but she's really mature, Mum. And she gets me. We just connect." 23. 17 and 23. Okay. 6 years. Not ideal, definitely raised an eyebrow, but again, I tried to be rational. It wasn't a huge difference in the grand scheme of things, especially as he was almost 18. My husband, Mark, was a bit more sceptical initially. 17, 23. Seems a bit much, doesn't it? He'd said quietly to me one night. I agreed it wasn't ideal, but kids are kids, and if she was a good influence, maybe it would be okay. "Let's just see," I'd said. "Let's meet her." That became the next thing. Liam was eager for us to meet Chloe. He talked about her constantly. She was apparently super smart, loved old movies like him, was an amazing artist, and was just so chill. He was smitten. We arranged for her to come over for dinner the following Saturday. I remember cleaning the house like crazy. feeling that mix of excitement and nervous judgment all parents feel before meeting a significant other. Saturday arrived. Chloe walked in, and she was different than I expected. Liam had described her as quirky and kind of bohemian. She was certainly that, I guess. She was pretty, in a sort of unkempt way. Layers of mismatched clothes, chunky jewellery. She had kind eyes. My first impression, honestly, she seemed tired. And maybe a little younger than 23 in some ways, but older in others, if that makes sense. Like the clothes screamed trying to be young, but her eyes held something weary. She was polite, maybe overly so, almost nervous. Liam was beaming, holding her hand, introducing her proudly. Dinner was fine. Chloe didn't eat much. She answered our questions, but her answers were often brief, sometimes vague. When I asked about her family, she said they lived out of state and they weren't very close. When I asked about her job, she said she was a freelance creative, doing graphic design and website work. She worked from home. Okay, plausible. What about college? She'd tried a few things, but decided the traditional path wasn't for her. She seemed a bit rootless. No firm answers about where she grew up specifically, what her long-term plans were, not even specifics about projects she was working on. Just generalities. Mark asked her what she thought of Oakhaven. She smiled. A little, a faraway look in her eyes. It's quiet, she said. Different from places I've lived. Where had she lived? Oh, all over, she said vaguely. Moved around a lot. Red flag number 1, maybe? Not a huge one, but noticeable. Most 23-year-olds have some anchor point they can talk about. A hometown, a college town, a city they loved. All over felt like a dodge. But she was quiet, maybe shy. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Liam was clearly head over heels, and she seemed to make him happy. He was talking about college applications with more enthusiasm, even seemed more focused. So, I reasoned, maybe this was a good thing. Maybe she was just a private person. We talked about movies, music, things Liam and she apparently shared interests in. She lit up a little when they talked about obscure indie bands. That part seemed genuine, but other times she just seemed absent, like she was calculating her answers. By the end of the night after she left, Mark and I debriefed. What did you think? I asked him. He chewed his lip. I don't know, Sarah. She's nice enough, but she gave me weird vibes. Super cagey about herself, didn't you think? A little, I admitted, but maybe she's just shy, or her family situation is difficult and she doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe, he said, but his tone was unconvinced. But the age thing, and the freelance creative who's lived all over, I don't know. Just keep an eye out, okay? I promised I would. I told myself I was overreacting. Liam was happy. She seemed harmless, if a bit enigmatic. People have complicated lives. Not everyone has a neat little story about where they came from and what they do. Right? That's what I told myself. I had no idea how deep the lack of a neat story actually went. That first dinner was the start of it. Not the start of the problems necessarily, but the start of the low hum of unease that settled in the back of my mind and just never left. After that, Chloe was around more. She'd come over after Liam's school. Sometimes she'd stay for dinner. They'd go out to that coffee shop or to the local park. Liam was absolutely infatuated. He'd look at her like she hung the moon. And honestly, watching him so happy, so completely head over heels. It was hard to rain on that parade, but the weirdness didn't stop. It just kept layering on, little by little. More subtle red flags fluttering in the breeze. Her stories about her past continued to be vague. One time, Liam mentioned her talking about growing up near mountains. Another time, she vaguely referenced living near the coast. When I tried to gently probe, oh, mountains? Like the Rockies or more like the Appalachians? She just brushed it off with a laugh. Oh, just, mountains. It was like pulling teeth to get any specific detail out of her. No childhood stories, No specific schools she went to, no names of old friends. For someone who supposedly lived all over, she had remarkably few concrete memories or connections she was willing to share. She also never, ever talked on the phone when we were around. If her phone rang, she'd either ignore it or get up and leave the room entirely to talk in hushed tones. One afternoon, I was working in my home office, which is near the back patio where Liam and Chloe were sitting. Her phone rang, and she went out to the very edge of the yard, almost into the neighbour's property, to take the call. She kept her voice super low, but I could hear snippets. It wasn't a typical casual conversation. It sounded stressed, like she was getting instructions or being reprimanded. I heard phrases like, "Can't talk nows," and "They're here," and I know. It was bizarre. When she came back, she looked rattled, but just shook it off as a telemarketer. Nobody talks to a telemarketer like that. Another big one, she never wanted us to drop her off at her place. She always insisted on meeting Liam somewhere or having him drop her off blocks away from where she supposedly lived, an apartment building she pointed out downtown. "Oh, parking's a nightmare right in front," she'd say. Or, "My roommate's really private." Excuses, always excuses. Liam, bless his trusting heart, just accepted it. He even felt bad for her, like she had a complicated, maybe difficult life. We suggested she meet Mark's side of the family. They're a big, boisterous bunch, Liam's cousins, aunts, uncles, always gatherings for birthdays, holidays, just because. Liam was excited about introducing her, but Chloe always had a reason not to. She was sick that weekend. She had a deadline for a freelance project. She had prior plans that came up last minute, every single time. It got to the point where my sister-in-law, Carol, joked, "Does this Chloe person actually exist? Or is she a very elaborate imaginary friend?" It was a joke, but it stung, because deep down I was starting to wonder too. Her social media presence was also minimal. Liam was friends with her on Instagram, but her profile was sparse. A few artsy photos of objects, landscapes, nothing with people, nothing showing her face clearly. No tags of friends or family, no posts going back more than a few months. It was like she'd just appeared. When I mentioned this to Liam, he said she was just really private and not into social media performativity. Again, I tried to accept it. Different generations, right? Not everyone lives online. But combined with everything else, it felt less like privacy and more like deliberate invisibility. The age difference, which was my initial worry, almost faded into the background compared to the sheer opacity of her life. The 6-year gap seemed less significant than the giant question marks hanging over everything else. I remember one evening, Liam was upstairs and Chloe was waiting for him in the living room. She was scrolling through her phone, and I saw a notification pop up briefly. It had a name and part of a message preview. The name wasn't a typical casual friend name. It looked like it could be a surname. And the message fragment was something about the schedule. Before I could get a better look, she swiped it away, her posture stiffening visibly. She hadn't seen me watching from the kitchen doorway, but I felt like I'd just witnessed a glitch in the Matrix. My gut was screaming at me. It wasn't just mild unease anymore, it was a full-blown siren going off. Something was fundamentally off about Chloe. She wasn't who she said she was, or she was hiding something massive. I tried talking to Liam about it gently. "Honey, have you ever wondered why Chloe is so private about her family? Or why we can't ever drop her off at her place?" He'd get defensive. "Mum, not everyone has a perfect simple life like ours. Maybe her family situation is messed up. Maybe she's got drama she doesn't want to share. You guys like her, right? She's nice to me, she treats me well, that's what matters." And he was right in a way. She was nice to him. She seemed attentive, she listened to him, she encouraged his art. But the foundation felt shaky. It felt like a performance. I remember looking at her sometimes when she didn't think I was watching, and seeing a flicker of something that didn't match the quirky artist persona. A look of calculation, or perhaps deep-seated anxiety. Mark agreed that things felt off, but he was hesitant to push too hard and alienate Liam. "Let's just keep observing," he'd said. Maybe she'll open up eventually. But the longer it went on, the less likely that seemed. The inconsistencies piled up like dirty laundry. A throwaway comment about a city she supposedly lived in for years, contradicted by something else she said weeks later. A detail about a past job that didn't make sense. Small things, but they added up, creating a portrait of a person whose life story was a patchwork quilt of convenient fictions. I knew with a certainty that chilled me that I couldn't just keep observing much longer. I had to find out who Chloe really was. The feeling was no longer just maternal worry. It was a need for truth, because the alternative was allowing my son to build a relationship on potentially dangerous lies. The decision to actively start digging didn't happen overnight, but there was a specific catalyst. It was a Tuesday afternoon, maybe late October. Liam was at soccer practice. Chloe was over, supposedly working on a graphic design project at our kitchen table. I was in the adjacent den paying bills. My laptop was open. She thought I was absorbed in paperwork. She got a text message. I heard the little ping notification. She picked up her phone. A moment later, she sighed, a really heavy, frustrated sigh under her breath. Then she muttered something that froze me. It was quiet, but clear enough. Ugh, not him. Always needing something. She was texting someone she clearly knew well, but didn't seem thrilled about. Then, and this is what sent a jolt through me, she typed out a response, and I saw the name at the top of the text thread briefly before she minimized it. It was a man's name, not just a first name. It was David Miller. David Miller. Now, why? Did that name send a chill down my spine? Because David Miller is the name of Mark's first cousin. He lives maybe an hour away, in the next county over, in the town of Harmony Creek. We don't see David often. He's a bit of a recluse, honestly. Always had some issues. Family drama, personal struggles, you name it. Mark feels obligated to check in on him now and then, but he's not close to that side of the family beyond obligate phone calls a few times a year. I've met David maybe 3 or 4 times over 15 years. He has a few siblings, but again, we're not close. We know the names, maybe saw them at a distant relative's funeral years ago. Why on earth would Chloe be texting David Miller, referring to him with that level of familiarity and exasperation? Always needing something. It made 0 sense. Liam knew David Miller was a distant cousin, but he barely knew of him. They had never met. There was absolutely no logical connection between my son's young, freelance creative, rootless girlfriend and Mark's reclusive, middle-aged cousin. My fingers trembled slightly as I finished typing in a payment amount. Chloe was still tapping away on her phone, oblivious. I needed to be subtle. I waited a few minutes, finished my bill paying, closed the laptop and got up, stretching dramatically. "All right, break time," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Anyone want some iced tea?" Chloe startled slightly, looking up from her phone. "Oh, sure, Mrs. Peterson, thanks." I noticed she quickly locked her phone screen and placed it face down on the table. The name David Miller was burning a hole in my brain. That night, after Liam was asleep and Chloe was long gone, I brought it up with Mark. "Mark," I said, my voice low, "do you remember your cousin, David Miller?" He looked up from his book, a frown creasing his brow. "Yeah? What about him? Everything okay?" I think Chloe is talking to him." I told him what I saw on her phone, the name, the muttered comment. Mark stared at me. "Chloe? David? That makes no sense. How would they even know each other? David barely leaves his house. He doesn't know anyone Liam knows. This is weird." "Exactly," I said. "It's beyond weird. It feels connected, like she knows him, which makes absolutely 0 sense in the context of how Liam met her or who she claims to be. It feels like another piece of this puzzle that doesn't fit. This was it. This wasn't just vague inconsistencies anymore. This was a potential, concrete link to something outside the narrative she had constructed. It was proof that her life wasn't just private. It was intentionally hidden, maybe even deliberately woven into threads that came too close to our own family tree. The next morning, the first thing I did was discreetly open my laptop. I didn't want to go through Liam's phone, that felt wrong. But I had to start somewhere. Chloe had mentioned she did freelance graphic design, sometimes for small businesses. Okay. I started with the most basic, publicly available checks anyone could do. A Google search for Chloe, her last name, which I'll call Adams here, graphic designer, Oakhaven, NC. Nothing. No portfolio website, no LinkedIn profile, nothing that screamed working professional. Maybe she used a different last name professionally. Okay. Next angle. Her supposed age, 23. I tried searching for people named Chloe Adams, roughly that age range, who might have lived in the areas she'd vaguely mentioned. Hundreds of results, obviously. Useless. What about the apartment building she supposedly lived in downtown? I looked up the building online. It was a well-known complex, popular with young professionals. I found reviews, photos. Nothing about a Chloe Adams living there, which wasn't surprising. You wouldn't expect that publicly. But it looked expensive. Did her freelance creative income really support living there? It felt unlikely, based on her sometimes scrappy appearance and lack of concrete projects. Then I thought about David Miller. Could I find anything about him online that might shed light? I knew his general age range, maybe late 30s, early 40s. I searched David Miller, Harmony Creek, NC. There were a few David Millers. One looked like a contractor, another a retired teacher. Then I saw one result from a local news archive. A small article from about 15 years ago about a local man involved in some minor fraud case. Nothing major, but enough to show he had a history of not being entirely above board. The name matched, and the town was right. Okay, so David had a sketchy past. Did that connect to Chloe? How? My heart pounded. This wasn't just trying to make sure my son's girlfriend was a nice person anymore. This felt like pulling a thread on a very tightly wound ball of yarn, and I had a terrifying feeling it was going to unravel into something I wasn't prepared for. The David Miller connection was too strange, too specific to be a coincidence. It felt like the first real, undeniable clue that something far more complex and potentially sinister than a simple age gap relationship was going on. I knew I had to go deeper. I had to find out who Chloe Adams really was, and why she was linked to my husband's estranged, sketchy cousin. This was no longer just a mother's intuition, it was a mission. The discovery of the name David Miller flashing across Chloe's phone screen was like someone had suddenly turned on a high-beam flashlight in a pitch-black room. It illuminated everything I'd been feeling in Technicolor. The vagueness, the secrecy, the jumpiness, the lack of roots. It wasn't just privacy or a complicated life. It was deliberate. It was a performance designed to hide something specific. And whatever she was hiding, it was connected to David Miller, my husband's estranged, somewhat shady cousin. My mind immediately started racing, putting pieces together. That didn't make sense on the surface, but felt chillingly right in my gut. Why him? Of all the people in the world, why was Chloe, my 17-year-old son's girlfriend, texting David Miller? And why was she so clearly annoyed by it, muttering about him always needing something? It was the kind of comment you make about family, about someone you're tied to, maybe begrudgingly. That night, after I told Mark, we talked for hours, whispering theories in the dark. Mark was just as baffled as I was, maybe more so. He barely knew David anymore, hadn't seen him in years, only the occasional brief, awkward phone call. He's never mentioned a Chloe, Mark kept saying, shaking his head. Never mentioned anyone he was close to, really. And definitely not someone in their early 20s. David's, well, you know David. He keeps to himself. His life is messy. Yes, I knew David was messy. Mark's family history wasn't exactly a Hallmark movie. There were rifts, secrets, people who didn't talk to each other. David Miller was part of the branch of the family tree nobody really pruned, just let it grow wild and tried not to touch it too much. He was a few years older than Mark, maybe early 40s now. He lived out in Harmony Creek, a small, run-down town known more for its single stoplight than anything else. The idea that Chloe, This seemingly young, artsy woman who claimed to be a cosmopolitan freelance creative was somehow connected to him was absurd, but the name was undeniable. Saw it with my own eyes. Okay, so I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was time to stop just observing and start actively looking, not in a crazy stalking way, but in a quiet, strategic, information-gathering way. I had to know who this woman really was, for Liam's sake. The next few days were a blur of nervous energy and covert searching. I felt like I was in a spy movie, except the stakes were terrifyingly real. While Chloe was over supposedly working, or when Liam was at school, I was online. I started with the basics again, but this time I was armed with the David Miller connection. I searched Chloe Jennings, that was the last name Liam used, though I had no idea if it was real, and David Miller together. Nothing. Too broad. I tried searching for Chloe Jennings in Harmony Creek, NC. A few results for people who seemed too old, or too young, or clearly not her based on photos. I went back to social media. Liam was friends with her on Instagram, a Chloe Creates Co., a professional-sounding handle. Her profile was still the same, abstract art photos, landscapes, never her face. I scrolled back through every single post, nothing personal, nothing that gave away a specific location, a friend, a family member, a workplace. It was meticulously curated to reveal absolutely nothing about the person behind it. It struck me then, this wasn't just being private, this was creating a ghost online presence. What about David Miller? I searched his name again, focusing on Harmony Creek. I found that old news article about the minor fraud case from years ago. It mentioned his age at the time, confirming he was now around 40. It listed his address at the time, which was still in Harmony Creek. Okay, concrete details about him. Did it mention family? No, just that he was a resident. Then I started, searching for public records in Harmony Creek. Property records, business registrations, anything that might have names attached. This was harder, more tedious. Most databases required specific names or addresses. I felt like I was fumbling in the dark. I also tried searching for Chloe, combined with names I knew were in David Miller's immediate family. Mark had mentioned David had a sister named, what was it? Brenda, Beatrice, I couldn't remember for sure, and a brother maybe. Mark wasn't close enough to rattle off names easily. I needed more information about David's family. This led to a delicate dance. I couldn't just ask Mark, "Hey, remind me of all your cousin David's siblings' names and ages." He'd instantly know something was up. So I tried to be sneaky. I brought up old family photos. Remember that picnic at Aunt Carol's like 15 years ago? Was David there? Who was he talking to? Mark would squint at the photo. Oh yeah, David. I think... Was that his sister? The quiet one? Belinda, maybe? Or Bernadette? I don't remember her name. We didn't really talk to that side much. Okay, Belinda or Bernadette. Another name to try. I searched Chloe, plus Belinda Miller, or Bernadette Miller. Still nothing concrete. This was exhausting. Every search felt like hitting a wall. Every vague detail Chloe had given felt designed to be untraceable. Lived all over, freelance creative, family out of state, didn't go the traditional college route. It was all perfectly crafted to leave no digital or paper trail. She was a ghost, except for David Miller. That was the only specific, tangible link I had. Why would she risk texting him where someone might see? Was it a slip-up? Or was she so deep in whatever this was that she was getting complacent? The more I dug, the more frustrated I became, but also the more certain I was that my gut was right. There was nothing about Chloe Jennings, 23, freelance creative, that seemed real. The life she presented to us, to Liam, felt like a flimsy set design, and somewhere behind the false front was the reality, tangled up with David Miller and his obscure branch of the family tree in Harmony Creek. The stress started to get to me. I was jumpy, distracted. I'd watch Chloe interacting with Liam, this sweet, seemingly devoted girlfriend, and feel a pang of guilt. Was I being paranoid? Was I about to blow up my son's first serious relationship based on a few vague answers and a text message I shouldn't have seen? But then I'd remember the look in her eyes, the hushed phone calls, the way she seemed to calculate every word, and the certainty would rush back. This wasn't paranoia. This was a primal instinct, screaming that something was wrong, fundamentally wrong. I spent hours staring at my laptop screen, searching databases, news archives, anything I could access. I even cautiously ventured onto sites that require payment, for deeper record searches, justifying the expense by telling myself it was for Liam's safety. I tried different spellings of her last name, different versions of Chloe. Nothing. It felt hopeless. She was a phantom. How do you investigate a person who seems to have scrubbed every trace of themselves from existence? Was about to give up, to tell myself I was crazy, that the David Miller thing was a bizarre coincidence, that Liam was just dating a genuinely private person. Then, late one night, maybe a week after I started seriously digging, I tried a different search strategy. Instead of starting with Chloe, I started with David Miller's known relatives, the few names I vaguely remembered or had dug up. I focused on Miller Family Harmony Creek, NC, and looked for public records like property transfers, wills, or even genealogical sites that might list family connections. It was a long shot. And then I found something. It wasn't a direct hit on Chloe Jennings. It was a record of a property deed transfer in Harmony Creek from about 20 years ago, a parcel of land transferring from estate of Thomas Miller to Bernadette Miller. Okay, Bernadette, that name again. And Thomas Miller was likely David's father. Listed on the document, almost as an aside, was a list of heirs or involved parties. And one of the names listed was Chloe Miller, minor. Chloe Miller, not Chloe Jennings, and listed as a minor 20 years ago, which would make her, well, not 23, significantly older, and listed in a legal document alongside Bernadette, Miller and in relation to the Thomas Miller estate. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a vague connection. This was a legal document, a public record, linking a Chloe Miller directly to David Miller's immediate family circle, his parents' estate, his sister Bernadette, and indicating she was a child 2 decades ago. This was the first crack. This was proof. Chloe Jennings wasn't just private, she had a different name, and her history was tied definitively to Harmony Creek and the Miller family. The fragile facade of the rootless, freelance creative shattered in that moment. I had found her. Or at least, I had found a significant piece of who she really was. And the truth was already starting to feel far more complicated and disturbing than I could have imagined. Finding that property record listing Chloe Miller minor was like finding the tiny, loose thread on a perfectly woven tapestry. You know, if you pull it, the whole thing is going to unravel. And I was about to pull. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. Chloe Miller, a minor 20 years ago. Doing some quick math, that would make her around 37, maybe 38 now, not 23, not even close. The age lie was massive. 6 years difference between her and Liam was one thing. A 20-something dating a 17-year-old was concerning, yes, but still arguably within a grey area. But a woman pushing 40 dating a teenager, that was illegal, that was predatory. And the name. Chloe Miller. Not Jennings. She had lied about her name, and the document linked her directly to David Miller's family, the estate of Thomas Miller, implying he was her father or grandfather, and Bernadette Miller, confirming Mark's vague memory of a sister named Bernadette. My mind was spinning. Why the lie? Why the elaborate story about living all over and being a young, footloose creative? Why the connection to David? Was she hiding from something? Or was she hiding who she was for a specific, calculated reason? The fear that had been a low hum for months suddenly roared to life. This wasn't just about my son having a girlfriend who was a bit cagey. This was about him being in a relationship with someone who had built her identity with him on a foundation of fundamental lies about who she was and where she came from. And that connection to the Miller family, the estranged, complicated, messy side of Mark's family. What did it mean? I couldn't just stop there. I had the name, Chloe Miller. I had the location, Harmony Creek. I had the approximate age range, late 30s. Now I needed to connect all the dots, fully. I needed to confirm this Chloe Miller was the Chloe who was dating Liam, and I needed to understand the depth of her connection to David Miller and his family. I went back to searching, armed with the correct last name and approximate age. This time the results were different. Searching Chloe Miller Harmony Creek NC brought up more possibilities. There was a yearbook photo from Harmony Creek High School from the late 1990s. A picture of a girl with kind eyes, a shy smile, and that same distinctive shape to her face that I recognised as Chloe's. The caption listed her name, Chloe Miller. Her graduating class year confirmed an age range that matched the property record calculation. It was her. Undeniable photographic proof. This wasn't some other Chloe Miller. This was the woman who sat at my kitchen table, holding my son's hand, spinning tales of a life that didn't exist. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. The person who was dating my son wasn't the 23-year-old Chloe Jennings. She was Chloe Miller, nearly 40 years old, from a tiny town less than an hour away, and demonstrably linked to Mark's family. Every interaction, every conversation, every red flag suddenly took on a terrifying new meaning. Her vagueness wasn't shyness, it was evasion. Her secretive phone calls weren't about private work, they were about coordinating a lie. Her refusal to let us see where she lived wasn't about a private roommate. It was about hiding the fact that she likely didn't live in the downtown apartment building at all. Maybe she lived back in Harmony Creek, or somewhere else entirely hidden. I felt sick. How could she do this? How could she look my son in the eye, look us in the eye, and construct such an elaborate, cruel deception? What was the motive? I delved deeper into the Miller family tree online, using the names from the property record. Thomas Miller, Bernadette Miller, David Miller. I found more public records, obituaries, online family trees posted by distant relatives I'd never met. It was like peeling back layers of history and finding this hidden branch. Thomas Miller was indeed David's father. Bernadette Miller was David's sister. And consistently listed among the children of Thomas Miller was Chloe Miller. Her birth date appeared in some records, confirming her age was not 23, but 38. My mind struggled to reconcile the numbers. 38. Liam was 17. The age difference wasn't 6 years. It was 21 years. My son was dating a woman old enough to be his mother, and not just any woman. A woman whose brother was David Miller, whose sister was Bernadette Miller. Relatives of my husband. Relatives of Liam. That's when the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying finality. David Miller was Mark's cousin. David Miller's sister was Chloe Miller. Mark's cousin's sister is his cousin. And Mark's cousin is Liam's first cousin, once removed. Which made David Miller's sister, Liam's aunt, Chloe Miller. The woman dating my 17-year-old son was his aunt. The realization slammed into me so hard I gasped out loud, sitting alone at my kitchen table late at night. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't just a lie about her age or her name. It was a lie about her entire identity and her relationship to our family. She was hiding in plain sight, weaving herself into my son's life under a false identity, a false age and a false premise, all while being directly related to him. How could this be possible? Why would she do this? Was David Miller involved? Was Bernadette? This wasn't just a girlfriend with secrets. This was a full-blown, calculated infiltration. My son was in a relationship with his own aunt, who was lying about everything. The implications were staggering, horrifying, and deeply, profoundly disturbing. I sat there for a long time, the computer screen glowing with the undeniable proof. The cheerful, quirky, chill Chloe Liam adored evaporated, replaced by this shadowy figure, Chloe Miller, liar, deceiver, relative. The warmth of the kitchen felt cold and alien. Everything I thought I knew about the last year, about my son's happiness, about the woman we had welcomed into our home, was a lie. A carefully constructed, intricately woven lie with threads leading back into the complicated, hidden corners of our own family history. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that the unravelling was just beginning. Discovering that Chloe wasn't just Chloe Jennings, 23, but Chloe Miller, 38, Mark's cousin's sister, which made her Liam's aunt, it was a level of betrayal and deceit I hadn't even considered possible. It felt like I had stumbled into a plot twist from a terrible movie, except it was my life. My son's life. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't paranoid. My gut had been screaming at me for a reason. Every single red flag, every vague answer, every evasive maneuver, they all pointed to this. She had constructed an entire false identity to be with my son. I needed to talk to Mark, immediately. But he was out of town on a short business trip. I couldn't wait. I called my sister-in-law, Carol, the one who had jokingly asked if Chloe was imaginary. Carol is practical, no nonsense, and knew just enough about Mark's extended family to understand the gravity of the Miller connection. "Carol," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You need to sit down, it's about Chloe." I laid it all out for her, the David Miller text, my digging, the property record listing Chloe Miller, minor, 20 years ago, the high school yearbook photo, the public records confirming her age and that she was Bernadette and David Miller's sister. The inescapable conclusion: she was Mark's cousin, Liam's aunt. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. Then, "Sarah, are you absolutely sure?" 100%, I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I have the documentation, the name, the age, the connection to Thomas Miller's estate, the yearbook photo. It's her, Carol. She's been lying about everything. Her name, her age, her job, where she lives, everything. And she's Mark's cousin, Liam's aunt." Carol swore, a strong, shocked expletive. "Oh my God, Sarah, your son, he's dating his aunt." "Yes," I whispered, the word feeling obscene. "And she's doing it under a fake name and age." "Why?" Carol asked, her voice full of horrified disbelief. "Why on earth would she do something like that?" "I don't know," I said. "That's what terrifies me. What is her motive? Is she unstable? Is David involved? Did Bernadette know?" We talked for a long time, trying to process the sheer absurdity and horror of it. Carol knew Bernadette and David vaguely from family gatherings years ago. Bernadette was always quiet, seemed a bit withdrawn. David was... David. Trouble seemed to follow him, but neither of them seemed capable of orchestrating something like this. And Chloe? Carol vaguely remembered a much younger Chloe at a few distant family functions years and years ago, maybe a child or young teenager at the time, part of that branch of the family. The memory was hazy, unimportant until now. The quiet one. The one who didn't stand out. Now she had made herself unforgettable for the most twisted reason imaginable. When I hung up with Carol, I felt marginally less alone, but the weight of the truth was crushing. My son Liam was completely oblivious. He was happy, in love with Chloe, the quirky artist, the cool older girlfriend who got him. How was I going to tell him? How do you tell your teenage son that the woman he's dating, the woman he's emotionally invested in, is not only 2 decades older than she claims to be, a calculated liar about her entire identity, but is also his blood relative, his aunt, the thought of his face when he found out, the hurt, the confusion, the inevitable anger at being so profoundly deceived. It was going to shatter him. And shattering Liam meant shattering our family. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't let this continue for another day. She was in our home regularly. She was manipulating my son. She was a danger, not in a physical sense necessarily, but in an emotional and psychological one. She had built this relationship on a foundation of lies that ran so deep, it felt almost pathological. But how? How do you confront someone who has gone to such lengths to hide their true identity? What do you even say? "I know who you really are." And what would she do? Deny it? Run? Get defensive? I decided to wait for Mark to come home. This was his family. He needed to be there, to hear it from me first, and to be part of the confrontation. It felt too big, too explosive to handle on my own, especially with Liam in the house. The next day was agonizing. Chloe came over after school as usual. She sat on the couch with Liam, laughing, scrolling through things on his phone. I watched her, seeing her with new eyes. Her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head, a certain look in her eyes. Now that I knew, I could almost see glimpses of the woman in the yearbook photo, the woman who was nearly 40. It wasn't that. She looked old, necessarily. She was young-looking for her age. But there was a maturity in her eyes, a weariness that I had initially dismissed as shyness or her bohemian nature. Now I saw it as the weight of carrying this enormous lie. She saw me watching her at one point and gave me a small, polite smile. I forced one back, my stomach twisting. She had no idea I knew. She was still operating under the assumption that her carefully constructed reality was holding. That night, Mark got home. He was tired from his trip. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to sound normal. "Yeah, long flight," he said, dropping his bag. By the door. "What's up? You seem jumpy." I took a deep breath. "Mark, we need to talk. In private. It's about Chloe. I found some things out." We went into our bedroom and closed the door. I sat him down and, as calmly as I could, laid out the entire, unbelievable saga. I showed him the printouts of the property record, the yearbook photo, the online family tree snippet showing Chloe Miller as Bernadette and David's sister. I explained the connection, how it made her his cousin and Liam's aunt. Mark listened, his face going from tired to confused, then to utter shock and disbelief. When I finished, he just stared at the documents, then at me, his mouth slightly open. "No," he finally said, shaking his head slowly. "No, Sarah. That's not possible. Chloe? My cousin Bernadette's sister? Dating Liam? No. Mark, the proof is here," I said softly, pushing the papers towards him. "It's her. She's Chloe Miller. She's 38. And she's his aunt." He picked up the papers, his hands unsteady. He looked at the yearbook photo, then at the property record. His eyes scanned. The family tree printout. Slowly, the denial faded, replaced by a dawning horror. Bernadette's sister. They had a younger sister. Chloe. I barely remember her. She was just a kid. This can't be. "It is," I said, the finality heavy in the air. "She's been living a lie, to be with Liam. We need to confront her, and we need to tell Liam." The weight of that statement hung between us. Telling Liam was going to be the hardest thing we had ever done as parents. Our son had been living a fantasy built on a foundation of lies, and the truth was going to be devastating. But we couldn't delay it any longer. The deception had gone on for too long, had become too entrenched. The time for truth, no matter how painful, had arrived. The confrontation, the unravelling, the fallout, it was all coming and fast, and I had no idea how any of us would survive it. The moment Mark and I decided we had to confront Chloe was perhaps the most terrifying of this entire ordeal, and believe me, that's saying something. The truth we had uncovered, that Chloe Jennings was actually Chloe Miller, Mark's 38-year-old cousin, and thus Liam's aunt, felt too monstrous, too unbelievable to just exist in our heads. We had to bring it into the light, no matter how devastating the consequences. Mark was reeling. Seeing the physical proof, the documents, confirming her real name, age and family connections, had shattered his denial. He kept running his hand through his hair, muttering things like, "Bernadette's sister. I don't understand. Why? Why Liam?" His confusion was a mirror of my own, only amplified by the fact that this twisted deception originated from his own family tree, a branch he barely knew but was undeniably connected to. We agreed we couldn't tell Liam first. Confronting Chloe with Liam present felt too volatile, too likely to explode in a way that would be incredibly traumatic for him. We needed to get her alone, lay out the proof and force her to reveal the truth, or at least react to it. Then, and only then, could we figure out how to tell Liam. It felt like a terrible burden, protecting him from a truth that was already wrapped around his heart, but we couldn't rip the band-aid off in front of the person who put the wound there. The opportunity came the next evening. Liam had a late school event, a debate club meet that would keep him out until almost 9. Chloe was planning to come over beforehand, hang out, and then leave before he got back, as she often did when he had late activities. This was our chance. The hours leading up to it crawled by. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart leaped into my throat. Mark and I were a wreck, trying to act normal around each other, knowing the bomb we were about to drop. We decided to do it in the living room, where we could all sit down. We had the printed documents, the property deed fragment, the yearbook photo, the family tree screenshot, placed discreetly on the coffee table under a magazine. She arrived around 6, just as planned. She came in with her usual quiet demeanour, dressed in her typical layers, offering a small smile. "Hi, Mrs. P, Mr. P," she said politely. She seemed maybe a little more subdued than usual, but I chalked it up to my own heightened state of anxiety distorting my perception. She had no idea what was coming. "Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can you come sit down for a minute? We need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly. She looked from me to Mark, who was standing a little awkwardly by the fireplace. His usual easygoing manner was gone, replaced by a rigid tension. Her eyes flickered, a tiny spark of unease igniting in their depths. "Oh?" she asked, her voice soft. "Is everything okay? Is it about Liam?" "It is about Liam," Mark said, stepping forward. His voice was tight. "And it's about you." That's when I saw it. The subtle shift. Her posture stiffened, her eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. The quirky artist facade didn't drop completely, but the foundation cracked. She sat down slowly on the edge of the armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. What is it?" I sat on the couch opposite her, Mark next to me. I reached for the magazine on the coffee table. "Chloe," I started, my voice gentle but firm. We care about Liam very much, and because we care about him, we need to know the truth about the people in his life, the real truth." I slid the printouts from under the magazine and laid them on the coffee table between us. The property record with the name Chloe Miller, minor. The yearbook photo of a young girl with her name underneath. The family tree with her name listed alongside Bernadette and David Miller, children of Thomas Miller. Her eyes fixed on the documents. For a long moment she didn't speak. Her face went completely pale. The colour drained from her lips. Her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in pure, unadulterated fear. It was the look of someone who knew they had been caught, utterly and completely. Finally she looked up, her eyes darting between me and Mark. Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice raspy. "That doesn't matter," Mark said, his tone hardening. "What matters is what they say. Chloe Jennings, that's not your name, is it? Your name is Chloe Miller." She didn't answer. She just stared at the papers, then down at her hands, still clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "And you're not 23, I continued, trying to push through the sickening tension in the air. "According to these records and other things we've found, you're much older. You're—" I paused, the word catching in my throat. "You're 38, Chloe." She flinched as I said the number. A single tear tracked down her cheek. She still didn't speak. "And these records," I said, pointing to the family tree, "they show you're the sister of Bernadette Miller and David Miller, children of Thomas Miller." I looked at Mark. Thomas Miller was Mark's uncle, which makes Bernadette and David his cousins. I turned back to Chloe. "Which makes you his cousin too." Mark leaned forward, his voice strained. "Chloe, are you telling us That you are my cousin? Bernadette and David's sister? Her shoulders slumped. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a shaky breath. When she opened them, the fear was still there, but resignation was starting to creep in. She looked utterly defeated. Yes, she whispered, the word barely audible. Yes, I am. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was real, all of it. The twisted truth I had uncovered was confirmed by her own lips. She was Chloe Miller. She was 38. She was Mark's cousin, Liam's aunt. But why? I asked, the question a desperate plea. Why did you lie about everything? Your name, your age, your life. Why create this elaborate deception? And why Liam? She finally looked up at me, her eyes pleading. It's complicated, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Complicated? Mark exploded, unable to hold back any more. He stood up, pacing in front of the fireplace. Complicated? You're dating my 17-year-old son under a fake identity, lying about who you are, and you're my own cousin. His aunt. How is that complicated, Chloe? That's sick. Mark, wait, I said, putting a hand on his arm, trying to keep some semblance of control. We needed answers, not just anger. Chloe, we need you to explain everything, from the beginning. Why did you do this? She hesitated, biting her lip. She looked at the documents again, then back at us. She knew she was trapped. The performance was over. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she started, her voice trembling. When I met Liam, at the coffee shop, I wasn't planning anything, I was just there. And he talked to me. He was so sweet, so genuine. He didn't see the mess I was. He just saw me, the person I wished I was. She paused, trying to compose herself. I didn't tell him my real age or name at first, it just didn't come up. And then he asked, and I panicked. I threw out Chloe Jennings, 23. It was the first thing that came to my head. And once the lie was out there, it just grew. It got bigger and bigger. It felt impossible to go back. But you knew who we were, didn't you? Mark asked, his voice still sharp with anger. You knew we were related. You knew you were his aunt. She nodded slowly, tears streaming freely down her face now. Yes, I did. When he told me his last name, Peterson, I knew. I knew who Mark was, vaguely, from family stuff years ago. I knew you were his son. And you still went along with it? I asked, incredulous. You still pretended to be a stranger, a young woman he could date. It wasn't like that at first, she insisted, looking desperate. It was just nice, having someone see me. Liam is so kind, so open. He made me feel normal, like I wasn't defined by everything else. Everything else? What everything else, Chloe? Mark demanded. She hesitated again, glancing at the documents. My life. It's not good. It's never been good. My family. David, Bernadette. There's a lot of problems. Financial troubles, other issues. She trailed off, vague even in confession. I was living not well, couch surfing, struggling. When I met Liam, it was like an escape, this perfect, simple world. Being Chloe Jennings was being someone else, someone better. And you dragged our son into your escape? I asked, my voice cold. You built a relationship with him based on a complete fabrication, knowing you were his aunt. I never meant to hurt him, she cried, finally looking truly distraught. I didn't think about the future. I just lived in the moment. He was happy. For the first time in a long time, I was happy. It was selfish, I know. It was terrible. But I couldn't stop. The deeper I got, the harder it was to tell the truth. And David? Mark asked, remembering. The text message. Why were you texting David? Is he involved in this? She flinched again. No, not in this. He just calls sometimes, needing money or things. He doesn't know I'm seeing Liam. Nobody in my family knows about Liam. They think I'm somewhere else, doing something else. I've been completely cut off. That part felt a little more plausible. It aligned with the vague family out-of-state excuse. But the rest, the intentional deception, the calculated lie about her age and identity to enter a relationship with her teenage nephew, it was almost impossible to comprehend the level of disconnect it required. So, you're telling us, I said, trying to sum up the horrifying reality, that you, Chloe Miller, who is 38 years old and Liam's aunt, pretended to be Chloe Jennings, 23, and a stranger in order to date our 17-year-old son. She nodded, tears silently falling. Yes, she whispered again. And you expected... What? Mark asked, bewildered. Did you think this could go on forever? Did you think we'd never find out? Did you think Liam would never find out? She shook her head, burying her face in her hands. I don't know. I didn't think. I wanted it to be real so badly that I pretended it was. Her confession, as raw and tearful as it was, didn't erase the magnitude of the lie. It didn't explain the years of calculated deception, the deliberate crafting of a fake life, the willingness to manipulate our son's affections for, what? An escape? A fantasy? The motive, even now, felt flimsy compared to the enormity of the act. Liam needs to know, I said, my voice firm. Right now, when he gets home. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with panic. No, please, not yet. Don't. Tell him he'll hate me, he'll be destroyed. He will be destroyed either way, Chloe, I said, my voice breaking a little. But he deserves to know the truth from us, not find out accidentally later. He deserves to know who you actually are, and who he actually is to you. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Let me go. Let me disappear. I'll never contact him again. You never have to see me again. Just don't tell him everything. Please. The idea was tempting, for a split second. To make her vanish, spare Liam the worst of the pain, pretend she was just a bad person who lied about her age and ghosted him. But we couldn't. Not only was the truth about her identity and relation crucial context for Liam, but allowing her to just disappear felt wrong, felt like letting her off the hook for the damage she had done. More importantly, it felt like leaving a wound open that could fester. Liam needed the full truth to even begin to process this. No, Chloe, Mark said, his voice firm and final. He has to know. All of it. He comes home in less than an hour. You need to be here when we tell him. You need to hear what this has done. Her face crumpled. She looked like a cornered animal. I can't, she whispered. You have to, I said, standing up. You made this mess. You need to face the consequences. You will sit here and you will hear us tell him the truth. The air was thick with impending dread. The confrontation, the confession, it was just the beginning. The real storm, the one that would tear through our family, was about to break when our son walked through the door. The devastating reveal to Chloe was one thing. The devastating reveal with Chloe present to Liam was another nightmare entirely. And it was only minutes away. The minutes waiting for Liam to get home were the longest of my life. Chloe sat huddled in the armchair, still crying silently, occasionally wiping her eyes. Mark and I sat on the couch, side by side, not touching, the silence between us heavy, with unspoken grief and outrage. We were two parents bracing for impact, preparing to deliver news that would irrevocably change our son's perception of reality, his trust in others, and potentially his sense of self. Every car that passed outside, every distant sound made us jump. We practiced briefly what we would say, how to be gentle but clear, how to explain the unbelievable, how to show him the proof. Chloe remained silent, a picture of misery and defeat. I looked at her sometimes, this woman who had inserted herself into our lives under such false pretenses, and struggled to reconcile the quiet, seemingly harmless person in front of me with the enormity of her deception. Was she remorseful, or just sorry she got caught? At that moment, honestly, I didn't care about her feelings. My only thought was Liam. Then, the familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the car door slamming, footsteps on the porch, the key turning in the lock. He walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, already talking before he even saw us. "Hey, Mum, Dad, I'm home. Debate went okay. I think I nailed my closing statement." He stopped mid-sentence, seeing the three of us sitting there, the sombre atmosphere. "Whoa, what's going on? Is everything okay?" His eyes went to Chloe, then back to us, a look of confusion on his face. He looked from one face to the other, sensing the tension. "Chloe? What's wrong? Are you crying?" Chloe lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked at Liam, and for a fleeting second, I saw genuine pain in her expression. "Liam, she started, her voice thick with tears, but couldn't finish. "Liam," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it, gesturing for him to sit down on the other side of the coffee table. "Honey, we need you to sit. We need to talk to you about something very serious. It's about Chloe." He looked even more confused and worried now. He dropped his backpack by the door and came to sit opposite us, next to the armchair where Chloe sat. He reached out instinctively and put his hand over hers where it rested on the armrest. She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. "Mom, Dad, what is it?" he asked, his voice edged with anxiety. Mark took over, deciding to get straight to it. There was no easy way. "Liam, honey, we found out some things about Chloe, things she hasn't been honest about." Liam frowned, looking at Chloe. "Not honest? About what? Is something wrong?" "Liam," I said, picking up the papers from the coffee table. "Chloe isn't who she says she is. Her name isn't Chloe Jennings." Liam's brow furrowed. "It's not? What do you mean? Her real name, honey, is Chloe Miller." I laid the papers out on the table, turning them so he could see them. The property record, the yearbook photo, the family tree. This is her real name. And these records show she's older than she told you. She's not 23, Liam. She's 38. His eyes scanned the documents. He looked at the yearbook photo, then back at the crying woman beside him. His face was a mask of disbelief. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not right. Chloe's 23. Her name is Chloe Jennings." He looked at her, pleading. "Right, Chloe. Tell them it's not true. Tell them it's a mistake." Chloe couldn't meet his gaze. She just shook her head slightly, tears still falling. "Liam," Mark said gently. "It's true, son. We have proof. Chloe herself, she's confirmed it. Her name is Chloe Miller, and she is 38 years old." Liam snatched up the yearbook photo, staring at it, then at her. But this is old. This isn't you, is it?" His voice was starting to rise, tinged with panic. "It is me, Liam," Chloe finally managed to say, her voice a broken whisper. It's all true. I'm so sorry." That's when it really hit him. The colour drained from his face, just like it had from hers. He stared at her, then at us, his eyes wide with horror and confusion. You lied to me? About everything? Your name, your age?" "Yes," she choked out. "I lied." He pulled his hand away from hers as if he had been burned. He pushed himself back from the table, scrambling away from her. His breathing became rapid and shallow. "Why?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Why would you do that? Why would you lie about something like that?" I didn't mean to hurt you," she sobbed. It happened." "It happened?" he shouted, jumping to his feet. He was shaking. You lied about your entire life to me for over a year, and you say it happened. He looked at us, his parents, bewildered and hurt. You guys knew. How long have you known? We just found out ourselves very recently, honey, I said quickly, standing up, wanting to go to him but hesitant. Just yesterday, truly, as soon as we knew we had to tell you. And there's more, son, Mark said, his voice heavy. Chloe is my cousin. Liam stared at Mark, utterly lost. Your cousin? What are you talking about? Remember David Miller? Mark asked, though he knew Liam barely did. My cousin from Harmony Creek. Chloe is his sister, and Bernadette Miller's sister. They're my cousins, which means Chloe is your aunt, Liam. The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible, grotesque. Liam stared at Mark, then back at Chloe, then back at Mark. The pieces clicked into place in his mind, the family tree, the names. David Miller, Bernadette Miller. He vaguely knew those names were connected to his father's side, that distant, rarely seen branch, and Chloe Miller was their sister. His face crumpled. Not with anger, not yet, but with pure, heartbreaking devastation. He looked at Chloe, the woman he loved, the woman he trusted completely, and the reality of who she was, and who she was to him, hit him like a physical blow. My aunt, he whispered, the word laced with agony. You're my aunt. And you dated me? Chloe could only nod, sobbing openly now, her face buried in her hands again. Get out! Liam screamed, his voice cracking with pain and fury. Get out of my house! Get out! He ran towards her, not to hit, but to shove, desperate to get her away from him. Mark stepped in quickly, putting an arm out to stop Liam, pulling him back. Liam, wait, just wait. No, get her out. Liam was hysterical, pointing at Chloe, who flinched away from his raw pain. I don't ever want to see you again. You lied to me. You lied about everything. Your family. How could you do this? Chloe stumbled out of the armchair, tears streaming down her face. She looked utterly broken. Liam, I'm so sorry. I don't care, he screamed, trying to get past Mark. Just go. Go, I hate you. Mark held on to Liam, who was sobbing uncontrollably now, his body racked with grief and rage. Chloe looked at us, her eyes full of a desperate, guilty sorrow. Just go, Chloe, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The confrontation part was over. The fallout had begun. You need to leave now. She didn't argue. She grabbed a worn canvas bag she had brought with her from the floor and fled, practically running out the front door. The sound of the door slamming shut echoed in the sudden silence, a silence immediately filled by Liam's heartbroken cries. He sagged against Mark, weeping. Dad, Mum, she lied. She lied about everything. She's my aunt. How could this happen? We held him, my husband and I, holding our son as he sobbed, trying to process the unimaginable. His entire reality had just been shattered. The woman he loved was a lie, a relative who had used a false identity to get close to him. The betrayal was profound, hitting him at the deepest level of identity and trust. The rest of the night was a blur of anguish. Liam was inconsolable. He paced, he cried, he asked the same questions over and over. Why? How? How could I not know? How could she? He felt humiliated, violated, heartbroken. He pulled away from us at times, needing space, then clung to us, needing comfort. He couldn't stay in his room. Everything felt tainted. He ended up sleeping on the couch that night, curled up, exhausted by his grief, clutching a pillow. Mark and I stayed up, talking in hushed tones, going over the night, the revelations, the devastating impact on Liam. What do we do now? Was there a legal angle? Was this considered? We didn't even know the right terminology. She was family. But she had groomed our son under false pretenses. It felt criminal, even if the specifics were murky. We needed to think about therapy for Liam, immediately. This wasn't something he could just get over. This was a trauma, a betrayal of trust at a fundamental level. We needed professional help to navigate this. We also needed to figure out how to deal with the Miller family side of things. Did Bernadette? No. Did David? What responsibility did they have, if any? Or was Chloe truly operating alone, a rogue agent in her own troubled life? The immediate fallout was chaos. Our home felt heavy with sorrow and anger. Our son was shattered. And looming over everything was the unbelievable, twisted truth. The girl he dated was his aunt, a woman who had deliberately constructed a lie to enter his life. The saga was far from over. We had just lived through the devastating reveal, but the long, painful process of picking up the pieces was just beginning. The days and weeks immediately following the confrontation with Chloe and the devastating reveal to Liam were the hardest our family has ever faced. It felt like we were living in a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Liam was a shell of himself. The vibrant, happy teenager was gone, replaced by someone quiet, withdrawn, and deeply, deeply hurt. He swung between periods of intense grief, where he would just cry or stare blankly at the wall, and moments of explosive anger, usually directed at Chloe, but sometimes heartbreakingly at us. "How could you not know?" he'd demand, even though we had only just found out. "How could you let her be in our house? How could you let this happen?" We understood his pain, his need to lash out, and we just took it, reassuring him that none of this was his fault, that he was the victim of a terrible deception. He refused to talk about Chloe specifically for a while. The mere mention of her name would make him flinch or leave the room. He deleted her number from his phone, unfollowed her on social media, where her sparse profile remained, a bizarre monument to a fake life. He packed up everything she had ever given him, a few small drawings, a quirky handmade bracelet, a couple of old DVDs they had watched, and put them in a box, asking us to get rid of them. He couldn't stand to look at them. Our priority was Liam's well-being. We found a therapist specialising in trauma and complex family dynamics and got him in for an appointment as quickly as possible. The first few sessions were tough, according to Liam, but gradually he started to open up a little, processing the betrayal, the confusion, the violation of trust. The therapist was invaluable in helping him understand that her actions were not a reflection of his worth or judgment, but a manifestation of her own deep-seated issues and dishonesty. That this was about her brokenness, not his. Mark and I also started seeing a therapist, both individually and together. We needed help processing our own shock, anger, and guilt, even though we rationally knew we weren't to blame. The how. Could we not see? Question haunted us. We needed to support each other and present a united front for Liam, while also navigating the profound sense of having our family privacy and safety invaded by this elaborate lie originating from within, our extended family. And then there was the legal aspect. This was murky territory. Was this considered grooming? Statutory rape? While Liam was 17 and nearing the age of consent in our state, which was 16 confusingly, the age difference was significant, and the deception about identity added a layer of manipulation that felt deeply wrong, perhaps criminal. We consulted with a lawyer. They advised us that while emotionally and psychologically devastating, the legal case was complex due to Liam's age and the specific statutes. However, the lawyer felt there might be avenues related to emotional distress, manipulation, or perhaps even fraud given the depth of the identity deception. It wasn't a straightforward open and shut case, and pursuing it would mean putting Liam through potential court proceedings, reliving the trauma publicly. Liam, when we cautiously brought it up, was initially resistant. He didn't want to make it a whole thing. He just wanted her to disappear and for the nightmare to end. But as his anger simmered beneath the surface, he sometimes expressed a desire for some form of justice, for her to face consequences. We decided to keep the legal option open, gathering the evidence we had, but putting the decision to formally pursue it on hold for a while, letting Liam lead the way when and if he felt ready. His healing was more important than any legal retribution at that moment. Then there was the family dimension. What about Bernadette and David? Chloe had claimed they weren't involved, that they didn't even know about Liam. But could we trust anything she said? We felt we had to address it, cautiously. Mark called Bernadette. It was an incredibly difficult conversation. Mark didn't reveal everything at once, just that Chloe had been seeing Liam, that they had discovered her real age and name, and that it had caused immense pain and confusion because she was his cousin. Bernadette's reaction was strange. She was quiet, reserved, as Carol had described her. She didn't seem entirely surprised that Chloe was involved in something messy, but the details of this specific situation clearly shocked her. She confirmed Chloe's age and identity, sadly acknowledging her as her younger sister. She confirmed that Chloe had been estranged from the family for a few years, living a transient life, struggling with various issues. She claimed she had no idea Chloe was in Oakhaven, much less involved with Liam. She expressed sadness and regret, but also seemed distant, almost detached, as if years of dealing with Chloe's troubles had created a protective emotional barrier. She insisted David wasn't involved either, that he was also largely out of the loop with Chloe. It was hard to tell if she was being entirely truthful, or if she was simply trying to distance herself and the family from the mess. We didn't push too hard on that first call. The emotional toll was too high. It left us feeling unresolved. We weren't sure if we believed their complete ignorance, but we also weren't sure how to prove otherwise or what involving them further would achieve, especially if they were genuinely unaware of this specific deception. It became another complicated layer we had to navigate. Life didn't just stop. Mark and I still had our jobs. Liam eventually had to go back to school, which was incredibly difficult. He was paranoid, watching everyone, convinced people knew or were looking at him differently. He pulled away from some friends, not wanting to explain or maybe afraid they would judge him. It was isolating for him and painful for us to watch. We focused on creating a safe, stable environment at home. We encouraged him to continue with therapy, gave him space when he needed it, and just tried to be present and supportive. We talked, sometimes about the difficult stuff, sometimes about mundane everyday things, trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy and trust within our own core family unit. The initial shock and fury started to subside, replaced by a dull ache of sadness and the long, difficult work of healing. There were no quick fixes, no easy answers, just the slow, painstaking process of helping Liam and ourselves come to terms with this profound betrayal. We had to find a way to move forward, to trust again, to understand that one person's calculated lie didn't mean the whole world was deceptive. It was a long road, and we were only just beginning to walk it, picking up the shattered pieces of our lives and trying to figure out how to put them back together. The saga wasn't neatly concluded with the reveal. It had simply entered its painful, messy recovery phase. The months that followed were about survival, really. And then, slowly, painstakingly, about rebuilding. The immediate chaos after the revelation settled into a heavy, persistent ache. Liam was in therapy twice a week. Mark and I were in therapy, trying to process our own shockwaves and figure out how to be the anchors our son needed when we felt like our own foundation had cracked. The house felt different, quieter, heavier, like the walls remembered the lies that had been spoken within them. Getting Liam back to school was a huge hurdle. He was so self-conscious, convinced everyone was looking at him, judging him, whispering about the freak show his life had become. We talked to the school counsellor, explained some of the situation in broad protective terms, a family crisis involving deception and betrayal, enough that they could offer him support and understand why his grades might dip or he seemed withdrawn. Some of his friends, the really good ones, stood by him, confused but supportive. Others drifted away, either unsure how to handle the intensity of it, or maybe just proving they weren't true friends to begin with. It hurt him, but it also showed him who was real. We didn't hear directly from Chloe after that night. She disappeared as completely as the fictional Chloe Jennings had. The canvas bag she'd grabbed contained almost nothing, a worn wallet with an ID for Chloe Miller, from years ago, a different state, a few crumpled dollars, some cheap earbuds, and a small, half-finished sketchbook. That was it. No trace of the freelance creative life. Just the meagre belongings of someone living on the edge. It felt like a sad, final confirmation of her struggle, but it didn't erase the anger or the hurt of the lies. We decided against immediately pursuing legal action. The lawyer had explained the complexities, the potential re-traumatization for Liam, and frankly, we just didn't have the emotional energy for a protracted court battle while trying to keep our family afloat. We kept the documentation, kept the lawyer's contact information, knowing it was an option if Liam ever felt strongly about wanting that kind of justice. For now, his healing was the priority. The brief, awkward conversation with Bernadette Miller hadn't yielded much beyond confirmation. We wrestled with how much to pursue that side of the family. Did we need to understand why this happened? Was there some underlying family dysfunction that explained Chloe's actions, or was she just uniquely troubled? Mark cautiously reached out to David Miller, his cousin. David was wary, defensive. He confirmed Chloe was his sister, acknowledged she had problems and was estranged, but swore he had no idea about Liam. His reactions felt genuine enough, a mix of embarrassment, defensiveness about his own difficult life, and maybe a touch of weary sadness about his sister. It reinforced Chloe's claim that she had cut herself off from them, and perhaps this whole scheme was entirely her own desperate, twisted creation. We decided to let that side of the family be for now. There wasn't a clear path to getting answers, or resolution from them that wouldn't just stir up more pain. The therapy helped. Slowly. For Liam, it was about processing the profound violation of trust. Learning that someone he loved and felt deeply connected to had deliberately deceived him on such a fundamental level. It messed with his sense of judgment, his ability to trust his own feelings. How could he have been so blind? The therapist helped him see that he wasn't naive or stupid. He was a kind, open-hearted kid who was targeted by someone who was a professional deceiver, someone skilled at manipulating emotions and presenting a false self. It was about reframing it from, "How could I not see?" to, "How could she do this?" It was a subtle shift, but a crucial one in releasing the self-blame. He also had to process the reality of the relationship itself. The fact that the person he had been intimate with, the person he had shared his hopes and dreams with, was not only decades older, but also his blood relative. That took a long time to even approach in therapy. The sheer wrongness of it was overwhelming. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was a fundamental disruption of his understanding of relationships and family. The therapist used terms like emotional incest, not in a physical sense, but in the profound violation of family, boundaries and roles through deception. It was heavy stuff, but necessary for him to process the full weight of what had happened. For Mark and me, therapy helped us deal with our own residual guilt and anger. Anger at Chloe, obviously, but also frustration with ourselves for not pushing harder on those early red flags, for not trusting our guts sooner. The therapist helped us understand that her deception was sophisticated and deliberate. She wasn't just a bad liar, she was committed to the performance. And our desire to support Liam, to not be the mean parents who judged his girlfriend, had clouded our judgment just enough for her to operate. It was a hard lesson in trusting intuition, even when it seems unreasonable. We also had to navigate our relationship with Liam. He needed us more than ever, but he also struggled with the idea that we hadn't protected him. We had to continually reinforce that we did protect him, that as soon as we had undeniable proof, we acted immediately, despite the cost. It was about rebuilding that family trust, strengthening the core unit that had been attacked from the outside, even if that outside was technically part of the extended family. We made a conscious effort to spend more quality time together, talking, doing things he enjoyed, creating positive memories to try and counterbalance the trauma. Gradually, slowly, over many months, we started to see glimpses of the old Liam. The laughter came back, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. He re-engaged with his friends, talked more about college plans, started sketching again, something he had stopped doing after Chloe left. The scar was still there, visible and deep, but the wound was slowly starting to close. He would still have moments of sadness or anger, triggered by something small, seeing a couple with a significant age gap, hearing a certain song, or just a quiet moment of reflection. But the episodes became less frequent, less intense. He learned incredible resilience. He learned a harsh lesson about trust, but also about the importance of vetting people in your life, of paying attention to inconsistencies, of the difference between healthy privacy and deliberate secrecy. He learned that it's okay to be hurt, okay to be angry, and okay to need help to heal. For us, Mark and I, this saga fundamentally changed how we view the world and the people in it. We are more cautious now, more attuned to those little off feelings that your gut tries to tell you about. It's a balance. You don't want to become cynical or suspicious of everyone, but you also can't ignore those intuitive warnings anymore. We also learned the immense strength of our own family unit. When faced with something this challenging, we pulled together. We prioritized Liam's well-being above everything else, above pride, above discomfort, above the desire to sweep it under the rug, reflecting back on the whole unbelievable saga. It started with a teenage crush and ended with the unravelling of a massive, cruel deception that originated from within our own family tree. It showed us that sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't from strangers, but from people who are, hiding in plain sight, using proximity and even relation to their advantage. I don't know where Chloe Miller is now. Part of me hopes she is getting the help she clearly needs, dealing with the issues that led her down such a dark, deceptive path. Part of me is still angry and wants her to face consequences for the damage she caused. But mostly, I just hope she is nowhere near Liam or any other vulnerable person. This story isn't a neat happily ever after. Trauma leaves scars. Trust, once broken so profoundly, takes a long, long time to rebuild. But we are moving forward. We are stronger, wiser, and more fiercely protective of the core family we almost saw shattered. We survived. We are healing. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing this raw, unbelievable truth, someone else out there who feels that nagging unease, who sees those fluttering red flags, will listen to their gut sooner than I did. Because sometimes, the person standing right in front of you, the person you think you know, is actually someone else entirely, hiding a truth you couldn't possibly imagine, and uncovering that truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to begin to heal and rebuild. And now, as the edges of this story begin to soften, and the weight of everything that happened starts to feel less sharp, looking back on it all, it feels almost hazy, like a long, winding road you travelled in the dark, and now, in the quiet dawn, you're just sitting by the side, watching the mist lift. That initial shock, that feeling of the ground shifting beneath you, it doesn't disappear entirely, but it settles, becoming a quiet hum beneath the surface of things. The truth, once it's out, just is. It sits there, undeniable, and you learn, eventually, to live around it, to find your footing again, even on uneven ground. What did I learn from navigating these impossible currents? Perhaps just the quiet strength that comes from facing the unbelievable and finding your way through anyway. Or maybe a gentle reminder that the lives we see on the surface can hold depths and shadows we can't even imagine, and that sometimes the kindest thing we can do is just hold space for the quiet unfolding of someone else's truth, while staying anchored in our own, as the night settles deeper, and the images from this strange journey and begin to fade. I hope that wherever you are, listening to this, you feel a sense of calm washing over you now, that the intensity of the story recedes, leaving just the soft quietness of the moment. If your eyes are heavy, if your thoughts are drifting, please just let yourself go. There's nothing left to figure out tonight. The story is told, the echoes are softening, and it's okay to just let go. Thank you for staying with me through it all, for lending your ear and your quiet presence to this impossible saga. It means more than you know. to have shared this space, this time, with you. And with that, our story closes. I hope it brought you some perspective, or at least a captivating escape. Sleep deeply.